Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining us on this episode of the Zach France Show. As a quick way of introductions, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. What's up, Zach? I'm excited to be here. My name is Steve Maier. I'm a staff analyst in the residential solar industry at a company called Sunrun. We are the largest residential solar provider in the country. And currently, I am largely focused on data centralization and governance for the operating business, as well as supporting the company's sales and operations executive leadership with centralized tools and the insights they need to succeed. In a previous life, I was a program and vendor manager at Amazon and kind of got my start in the world of analytics by necessity after getting thrown into that pond. So, slicing data is near and dear to my heart and excited to talk about today.
The pond that you got thrown into keeps getting bigger and bigger and deeper and deeper. Let's talk about the ecosystem that you're developing, right? Any company that really wants to be data driven, they need a centralized source. They need one place to go and understand their data and visualize their data. So can you talk about how you start to do that, and what are some of the challenges that you've gone through, and what are some of the successes that you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a really interesting challenge to tackle for any enterprise. Having worked at a couple companies ranging from small startups to the Amazons of the world, I've seen different stages in analytics development. And in my experience, oftentimes smaller companies that have to be agile and don't have a whole lot of infrastructure just run fast, pull data in its rawest form, and are scrappy, get to insights quickly, build to scale, conquer the growth curve quickly. And then, over time, as companies grow, it becomes very easy for silos to develop as organizations become big, for people to be on different pages. And so I think, developing a governed kind of central core is really fundamental to taking a business to scale and operating it with high efficiency. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do at Sunrun, and what I think you're increasingly seeing across the analytical landscape, is companies try to develop single sources of truth, govern data sources that allow people to self-serve their own data quickly through a variety of means, ranging from rapid prototypes, effectively pulling code out, making decisions, to kind of middle ground platforms like Big Squid, like the AutoML platforms of the world, to full-on GUI interfaces. And, the way people interact with data will be different depending on the audience. But if people don't have the same fundamental information and the same understanding of that information, it's very challenging to run a business, because you don't have people on the same page and you're not driving alignment on the problems that matter the most. And so, to answer your question directly, we're using a platform called Looker and Google BigQuery. Google actually acquired Looker yesterday. So good for them. Shout out Looker for that payday. But to try to create that ecosystem and really create an operational center of excellence around the data.
For smaller companies, right? Maybe startups, maybe in the SMB space. At what point should companies really start building out this centralized, data warehouse, data lake with this ecosystem? Is it like do it as soon as possible because it's easier to do it up front than it is to go back and try to, redo the whole thing? Or is it, wait until you're a little bit bigger, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think the earlier you start, the less technical debt you build. And it's always going to be a balancing act, right? I mean, you have to move very fast in the early days of having a startup as you aspire to, say, make money. And, a certain amount of scrappiness is required. But I think at a foundational level, organizing the data that you have in a streamlined and coherent way, making sure that there's good documentation around that data, and then investing in platforms that allow for open access. allow for API access, can scale in the big data world, and kind of future proofing yourself so that as you build robust visualization platforms, as you enable ML workflows, things of that regard, you're not having to start from scratch. So I guess to put that in more practical terms, when I was working at a study abroad startup with 5 people in the office, very much we were just going into a database, pulling code using languages, and spinning up our own Google Sheets to derive insights. And that was enough. We didn't need a looker. However, you still had to know what was going on, and the risk of misalignment, even though it was at a smaller scale when you could tap the other person across the room, still had real consequences. So I think it's pertinent in both atmospheres.
I want to touch on the last thing that you said. So misalignment has consequences at any level, right?
Yep.
It's bigger at a bigger company. But can you give, I mean, do you have like an example where you were like, fuck that one up?
Yeah. Thinking back to a past role where I was a vendor manager, I can remember a time when I inherited a suite of partners and basically was told to grow the category aggressively, like to triple the size of the category, go out and chase 40 new companies. And I remember like digging in myself, and as I looked at the numbers being like, wait a minute, I don't even know if we're making money in the current state. Like, I don't really know why are we doing this, and realizing that the assumption that we should aggressively scale came down to one party believing that a specific metric, shipping costs, were low, and myself correctly thinking they were high. And fundamentally having to then renegotiate some fairly aggressive OKRs and throttle back the growth of a category that everyone was previously excited about, because one person thought it was up and unfortunately the reality was pointing the other direction. And I think that drastic disconnects like that are fairly rare, but I do think that either minor differences of like perspective in terms of analytics can really undermine trust between teams.
Yeah.
They can lead to a lot of noise because people end up spending meetings arguing about what's correct as opposed to actually making decisions. And fundamentally, I think that the scarier it is to pull correct data, the less people try to hack it themselves. And that's really my biggest concern. Like that example I gave, I haven't really encountered too many times in my career where you've had one team thinking apples and another oranges, but I've encountered a lot of times when people have been reticent to jump in and start, exploring, because they know the learning curve is difficult and the opportunity costs, the sacrifices to business progress that come with that are immense for any organization when there are data bottlenecks that emerge as a result, basically.
I like the example you gave because while it is maybe a little extreme, that's a serious misalignment, right?
Yeah.
But you say like compare like an apple to an orange, but people being two different varieties of apples happens all the time.
Totally.
If you compound a little disagreement over, 100 decisions, 1,000 decisions, right? Then it actually really starts to impact you.
Totally.
I was working with a client. We're actually onboarding them right now, and they have all this stuff in spreadsheets. They have stuff in NetSuite. It's kind of everywhere, and they're thinking that their close ratio is like 4% on these RFPs, and we're like getting into it, and they don't know like really like what the price is that they're bidding at. They don't really know their profitability, and a lot of companies, they just don't even know. Like they have an idea because they see, okay, we have this much in our bank account, and all right, cool. But like what led to that? Was it the quality of your sales rep? Was it the price? Was it? There's so many things that, like to your point, once you get into a meeting, you say, hey guys, mathematically, this is what's impacting our sales, or this is what's impacting our cost or our shipping or whatever it is, right? Cool. Now that we know, let's focus on improving those metrics so we can drive bottom line growth.
Exactly. And when you can unlock like folks heading into that meeting with that context so they can think ahead of time, when
Yes.
you also have your analytical talent focusing on those insights ahead of time because they're not scrambling to, figure out how to I'm trying to figure out how to extend this Apple analogy, how to
Yeah.
work on their Apple computer and get to get to data for the meeting. I mean, again, like that is time you are not differentiating yourself from your peers. And for every, you know, those missed opportunities and that progress compounds over time just as much as mistakes can compound together, as you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. They both rob you of something important.
Yeah. If you're just 1% better every single day, in a year, you're like, so much better as opposed to if you're 0.99 better every single day for a full year. And a lot of people have this like notion that machine learning is magical, it's going to transform your business, and like, oh my God, like, but really it's not about this like big, like transformational change. It's how can I make this one thing in my business 3% better?
Totally.
And then next year, how can I make it 1% better? And eventually those things really add up. But adding analytics to your business, it isn't going to make you like transformatively better, but it's going to give you better insights so you can make better decisions, one little decision at a time.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And we live in a world with such intense competition that,
Oh yeah.
a fraction of a basis point
Yeah.
can cause you to win or lose. So, and fundamentally, it's probably the hardest part. I mean, beyond just having good judgment. And so it's one of the biggest differentiators,